stuck here. The cops won't bother me. The squids, I thought I'd talk to you guys a little bit about the Super Tenere. You know, this is the status of my bike, or my garage here. I have the SH150 and then I have the Super Tenere. You know, a lot of people, they won't even consider a scooter. But before I show you the Super Tenere, I wanted to show you this thing. And one of the things I recommend people, especially if you live in the outskirts of cities or you live in cities, actually it's even better for living outside the city. Like for this one, I really like it because I can ride to DC, be completely stealthy, nobody really pays attention. I wish it was a more vibrant color, but beggars can't be choosers, right? And I can park on the sidewalk for free. You know, with the pandemic, it's not a big issue even parking a car, but this thing, you can't park it on the sidewalk for obvious reasons. It's just so massive. And that makes it a little bit less usable for commuting, especially around here. Now, if you have no issues parking, or if it's cheaper to park a motorcycle, then yeah, the Super Tenere is fine. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about this bike because I've had it for a while. And, you know, since it's not a very popular bike, a lot of people don't know much about these. But the more I read up on this, the more I realize that it's a really fantastic little thing. I'm going to pull it out of the garage so you guys can see it. It's a very strange color. You don't really find a lot of these black ones, but so one of the things to note is that the tires are absolutely the same for this as the GS and even for the V-Strom 650. That is 19-inch up front and 17 in the rear. So you know, a lot of people ask why get this over a GS, and for me it's pretty simple. This one requires a lot less maintenance to keep running. And I've been bashful of BMWs before because I've had two, and it's not that they're bad bikes. Actually, the GS is a really brilliant adventure bike and it doesn't feel as heavy as this one. And because the motor or the heads are down here, so it basically creates a lighter feeling bike, and it is lighter and a little bit more powerful. But for me, my top priority is really reliability. And when it comes to reliability, the Honda, or the Yamaha, sorry, is always been on top of the reliability for motorcycles. It's been always rated really high. The Yamahas I've had have been extremely reliable. And if you're a guy like me that I don't even have a cell phone and I don't want to be stranded out somewhere, you want something that's durable, and if I'm out riding, it's not gonna cost a lot of money to keep running. And I think that's what this Yamaha Tenere is to me. It's just a bike I can keep for 5-10 years, put 50,000 more miles on it, 100,000 more miles, and it's not going to require a lot of maintenance. The BMW, for example, it requires a lot more maintenance because it's just that type of bike. And I haven't kept a BMW for a very long time, but I never felt like they were very durable. Also, this bike is, I think the styling does look pretty good, and it's a matter of taste, of course, but I kind of feel like it's a very clever design bike without the high price that BMWs are. One of the things that's kind of neat is the two-step seat. I do like that sort of thing about bikes. And this is you can adjust it. There's two adjustments, the low and the high. I like to keep my bikes high, so it's at the highest position. The suspension on this is absolutely amazing. It's great, and it doesn't take a lot to adjust, and it's pretty simple, but it's fully adjustable. Front suspension has got the upside down forks, so these have been worked on. You can see New York State inspection, motorcycle inspection. It's actually ran out, but I'm not in New York, so it doesn't matter. I never had the bike with upside down forks. Actually, I had my XR650R, but that's because the forks were from another bike. The suspension on this is absolutely perfect for me. You know, the new Tenrays have electronic suspension, and that's a really nice thing. I've driven cars with electronic suspension from Porsche, like 911s, and it is amazing the stuff that you can do with them. But I find that after you adjust the suspension on this, and it's really adjustable, preload, damping, and everything, you don't really need electronic suspension. It's one of those things that people are putting into their bikes because it's what you expect from 2020. So one of the things that's kind of neat about this bike is that it's surprisingly slim in most places. Like the rear here, it's very slim, and then when it gets to the gas tank, it gets very wide up here, and the reason is because the radiator and the battery. And then towards the head, it gets tiny again. It kind of resembles an insect. I don't know if that's what Yamaha was going for, but it is a very odd style bike. It does resemble some of the old Dakar bikes. You know, the it actually looks a little bit like the Yamaha TDM 850. And if you don't know that bike, you might want to look it up. It's quite amazing. It's a twin cylinder, so Yamaha has been doing this for a while. I do want to get something to cover this because I can see myself breaking the seals on this rather easily. That's one thing. If you ride gravel and fire roads, I don't know, it just seems like it's a weak spot on bikes. I've had to change a lot of fork seals. This one does have ABS, and it's a pretty good system. I've never really cared too much for ABS, but it's interesting. And this one's got a aluminum bash plate. I usually don't buy a lot of these accessories. I've heard of people breaking their cases, so I'm glad this one came with it. This one does have crash guards. That's something that I do like for an adventure bike, especially something this big, because it's about 580 pounds, so it's not a light bike. So you're going to be dropping it if you're doing any sort of off-roading. I don't recommend it because it is a very big bike, and it's an expensive bike. That's what people, I don't understand about people who take these off-road, is I do not want to drop such a expensive bike off-road. From the front, you know, the headlights are surprisingly good, and it was nice that Yamaha made them like with this projector beam, because they have a very defined pattern on the road. I don't see that the headlights are superior or like extremely good, but they are better than many bikes. This is plastic. One thing you might notice from the front is that there's a hole here. There's no hole here. There's like a little one, but it's just cosmetic. This is kind of like the induction for the engine, because right over here you have your fan, and this gets pretty hot, especially in the summer. It throws out a lot of heat over here, so people advise on not putting bags here so the engine doesn't get too hot. But another interesting thing is that this gets flared out so much on both sides. It's got a very strange thing, because sure, it's wide, but if you're riding in the winter, this has a dual effect because it protects your knees from the wind. And one of the things in the past is riding in the winter, your knees and feet get really hot, or cold, sorry, and this kind of protects it quite a bit. It deflects a lot of the wind off of you. So the wind deflection on this is really excellent. This one does have hand guards, so this will protect you from dropping it, but most likely it's better just for wind protection. It's a hydraulic clutch, works really well. It's tiny, and I do have my GPS and my tank bag, but one of the things I wanted to show you really quick is that this one does have traction control. So if I turn it on, and there's a couple of things that annoy me. It's like these two cables should have been routed differently by Yamaha. No big deal. So on this is the first gen, so it's different than the new ones, but you have two buttons down here. This one controls trip, and the odometer, you see it's 52,000. Trip 1, 87. When it's blinking, that's when you can reset it by pushing it again. And this gives you your calculations up here. So 66 degrees right now. Engine temperature, online, the riding MPG. This is your fuel. This is really inaccurate. I don't understand this at all. Seems like makers don't make accurate fuel gauges. This side, so here's your blinkers. It's kind of like a weird retro sort of style. But this button here, if you notice, if I push it, it goes into traction control 2, traction control 1. If you push it, it turns it off. So you have no traction control. But what annoys me is that if I turn it off and I turn it back on, it goes into traction control 1 again. But what if I really like traction control 2 as default? You can't do it. It puts it into 1 default all the time, and that's rather annoying. Handlebar here, you have a mode button, and the mode button switches from touring to sport. I leave it in sport most of the time, but what I found is with the touring mode, it is kind of useful because it lets you ride at low speeds and it's less twitchy. So at sport mode in low speeds, the bike is super twitchy, and it's not a very good bike to ride around parks because it looks like you're trying to do wheelies as people are having their lunches outside. Reason I wanted this is that this is a very reliable shaft drive. And shaft drive is something that has kind of gone out unless you get like one of the bigger touring bikes, but I really like the idea of having a shaft drive because it's so more maintenance than having a chain. When it comes to doing chains, you're going to be spending a lot of time on it. So for me, the less time I work on bikes, the better. This one does have ABS as well. There's not a lot of space in between the tires, and I was considering going dark side on this, but I am going to get a motorcycle tire for now, and then I'll do dark side. I do need a rear tire because this one's losing pressure. This is a pretty decent carrier. Yamaha apparently doesn't want you to have the top box and side boxes together mounted, which makes very little sense. This bike looks good with the very boxy side cases and top box, but I don't have those. That's kind of an expensive item. I wish it came with it, but that's what it is. I have a heated gear thing here that the previous owner got. So going to this side of the bike, you have the adjustment for your rear shock, and I have it on medium, I guess, but you can firm it up as you're riding if you have a passenger. It works pretty well. And look at this frame. It's just kind of a cool frame, very well done. Now on this side, it's very difficult to tell, but there is an oil sight glass that it took me a while to figure out where it was, but it's right in there. Very difficult to see. Yamaha could have put it in a different location, but that's where it is. And filler to adjust the valves, that's that. And apparently the marks are going to be horizontal. I've seen people remove this entire thing. You do not need to do that, but one of the things I also like is that the engine is completely exposed as opposed to being covered with plastic. It does have quite a bit of plastic up here. Yamaha was clever enough to make these bolts. You turn them 1/4, 0.25 on 4 sides, and you can slide this out. And this is where the battery is. So the battery is kind of high up. Once this battery dies, I think I'm going to get a lithium battery just so I don't have to have so much weight up on the top. Yeah, the bike actually looks pretty good, and I think what I like about it is that it blends into the environment a little bit. Nobody really pays attention to it, but when you see like a BMW, the guys that usually own it are a different type of guys. They don't really care the price of things. You know, it's kind of like what they say, if you have to ask how much it is, then you can't afford it. But this bike, you know, I got it for, I guess, around $5,000, $4,500 to $5,000, and that's the low end. But I think you can get this bike for $6,000 very easily with low miles, and you have a bike that you can completely keep for years and years and ride for a very long time. And that's why I like this. You know, the V-Strom was great, but having to deal with chains every 20,000 miles or 15,000 miles, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. I know it's no big deal. I've done many chain replacements, but having a bike that you just don't have to do it, that's kind of like a cool thing. So let's go ahead and start this thing. Turn the key on, and then it's got a very slow idle or slow start. I think it's because the engine is so large. It is fuel injected. The rear is almost directly from a Yamaha R6 of the early 2000s. I had a friend of mine that had one. The exhaust note, it sounds pretty wimpy at idle, but this bike sounds very good as you ride it. You would think that, oh, an inline 2 doesn't sound good, or parallel twin, whatever you want to call it, but when you rev it, it actually sounds pretty darn good. I'm going to turn it off. Fuse box here, so all the fuses run off of that. And Yamaha did give you a 12-volt cigarette lighter here, 12-volt socket, so you can tap and put, you know, a USB charging device here really easily. Very clever. Also, another note, this is spokes. The spokes go out to here, so this is a tubeless tire design. The bike in the twisties handles really good, and the way it makes power makes it very easy to ride. You know, these adventure bikes with their wide handlebars are very easy to ride fast, and it's got like enough power that you'll never need anymore. And there is a guy online named Long Haul Paul, and he's had two of these. He had a 2012 and a 2013, and he never had any issues. And he put about 150,000 miles per bike, or 120,000 miles per bike. So it's kind of a nice feat of engineering, because that was the first bike. So these things are very reliable. And the guy is in New Hampshire, I believe, and he just rides all over the world, all over the United States. So handling is really excellent on it. What I like about it is that it is an adventure bike, so you can go travel on forest roads and all that sort of stuff, and I don't mind getting it dirty, and it actually looks better dirty, right? It really feels like the best bargain in large adventure bikes. Shaft drive, 1200cc, I forgot the horsepower, but it doesn't really matter. You can ride it as fast as any other bike. It might be slower as far as highway than an FJR, but this is a much better bike for me because I like the upright sitting position. But for $5,000, $6,000, you can get one of these, but you cannot get a GS from 2012 for that price. So that's the Yamaha Super Tenere. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.
You pay the gas bill. Do you realize what you've done?